Doreen Granpeesheh is the
Dr. Doreen is an expert in autism.
Doreen Granpeesheh.
Dr. Granpeesheh.
Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh.
Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh is a visionary in the field of autism. Now you can ask her questions on Ask Dr. Doreen.
I'm going to go to a question that somebody sent in last night that has a little to do with this. My son is 4 years old. He's nonverbal, classified as intellectually disabled, and severely autistic. He is a very sweet little boy, and I love him very much. He needs a lot of special care and is emotionally and mentally more like a very young 2-year-old. He's 4 now.
Yep.
He goes to an autistic specialized preschool and absolutely loves it. I am having some difficulty with recent behaviors and the school isn't really helping with ideas. He likes scripting from YouTube videos, mostly nursery rhymes and songs with alphabets and numbers. The scripting in itself is not a problem. The main problem is that he does not control the volume of his voice at all. He will script literally nonstop day and night. Most children, when they wake up at night, become bored and go back to sleep, but he is perfectly happy to entertain himself for hours on end. Does anybody have any suggestions of how to help him understand that there are times that he cannot do these behaviors, at least he has to do them quietly? Given his limitations, simply requesting to be quiet does not work and only pauses his action for about 3 seconds. I am a single mom and I lack social support. I have also explored every resource in the area and there are not a ton. I am utilizing what is available, but I need more help. So that was 16 hours ago. I'm sending this mom a hug.
And I hope to God that you are watching or that you will watch this episode because this is super, super important.
Yeah.
So if you have a child who has a diagnosis of autism and someone gives you a secondary diagnosis of ID, intellectual disability, please, please have your child retested with a non-verbal test of intelligence. These are the Merrill-Palmer or the Leiter-R. These are the two tests, Merrill-Palmer or Leiter-R. It's important you do this. Why? Because when your child has a diagnosis of ID, most of the world will simply give up and say, he has intellectual disability. There's no point in trying to teach him this stuff. He's just going to learn a certain amount. It used to be the case, that used to be the case also with autism, but I think that has changed a little bit. The point I'm trying to make is that it is important that your child be given the opportunity to learn. And especially your child, because your child has potentially, possibly, will have some hyperlexia, maybe. We don't know, but he's scripting numbers and letters. A lot of the kids that script numbers and letters are very strong when it comes to numbers and letters. And that shows up later in their intelligence, and it actually skews their intelligence high. So these are kids that later on become known as geniuses, which is very important for you right now, because not only is it important to know it so that no doors are closed for him. This is probably my biggest thing here. It's like, don't let them close doors on him. The other part of it is that you now know that he is someone who is potentially a visual learner. And he will learn these numbers. When my kids learn letters, they teach themselves how to read. That begins to teach them how to speak. It opens up a whole new world for them. And I don't want any hyperlexia. In fact, a lot of kids who have hyperlexia and are very focused on letters and so on do extremely well, as opposed to not doing well at all. Yeah. Now, the issue that you have here is pretty simple, actually. He's scripting. I'm saying, it's so funny, after you've seen thousands of kids over the years, when someone gives you a scenario, you immediately think of a child.
That's like that.
That's like that.
Yeah.
That's exactly like that. I had a child who was exactly like that and would script so loudly. I mean, it was unbelievable all the time. And it was all the, you know, he was into numbers and letters, but he would count. every single possible thing. Like he would count stairs as he was going up and down them loudly, 1, 2, 3, 4. And let me tell you, after a while, it's unnerving, right? Because someone who's just repetitively doing that. And he was so into letters and stuff that he had this system where he had like, put letters into the universe, right? And so like if he counted, X number of ceiling squares, he would also be able to establish letters into them. Kind of like, what was that thing we saw, the series that had the genius who used to play chess? Queen's Gambit.
Yeah.
Do you remember how she used to like look at the ceiling and so stuff like that? Yeah. I remember when I was watching that, I was like, oh my God, so many of our kids do this kind of stuff. They have the ability to hold visual information in space, you know? So what you are trying to do right now is just to teach him to do it quietly in his head. And this is it's a lesson we used to we had written, and we used to call it saying versus thinking. And it's difficult at first for a young child to learn this concept, but you have already started it. Because when you sit with him and you say quiet and he does it for 3 seconds, that's your baseline. That's where you're starting. And all you have to do now is shape that to be longer. And so you will sit with him and you'll say quiet, and you can do this in a multitude of different ways. You can either put a timer, and when the timer buzzes, you will say, good job, and now you can talk and reward and all this. Or you can count on your hands while he's quiet, but you will extend that period of time where he learns that quiet is something that goes on until you say, okay, we can talk now. And that is a really good thing. And later, when he gets a little bit more advanced, you can actually start, when he's quiet, by the way, it's not like he has stopped scripting. He can do it in his head. He's doing it in his head. In fact, the same child that I mentioned to you, years later had come to my house, because his parents actually became very good friends of mine, had come to my house, and he was so amazing, this child. He is so amazing right now. He's brilliant and doing extremely well. But it was so cute because he had learned that those, the counting behavior wasn't something that was really acceptable. So he would like, oh, I want to see your backyard. Can I see your backyard? So I'm like, sure, let's go. So he'd go in the backyard and he'd walk along the pool and then walk to the back of the backyard and come back, and then he'd bring it into conversation. He'd say, do you know that your pool is exactly, X feet long, and so on and so forth. And he would make it a normal conversation, but what he had done was he had counted as he was stepping. Right. And he had gotten so good at doing this in his head that he could also just converse with you, appear completely fine, yet he was thinking it. Which, by the way, is what we do. It's what every person does, right? If you think for a moment, it's very interesting exercise. When you're in your car, turn off the radio. And then all of a sudden, you'll recognize so many more thoughts that you are having, whereas when your radio is on, you have these thoughts, but the conscious ones are just pertaining to what's going on music or radio. And so we have a lot of subconscious thoughts, and they can be scripting, they can be repetition of letters, it doesn't matter. The issue is if you can control it and not allow it to be so loud that it disturbs the environment. And that's all. And that's sometimes the really important point with autism, is that we have these sensory things going on, right? I mean, Shannon, you remember one of my older recovered kids, who, by the way, I miss and should get in touch with and see how he's doing. He was a biostatistician doing extremely well. One of the things he taught me was that when he was younger, the sounds that were much louder for him were things like the door opening and closing. And it was really hard for him to focus on language because he would count all those sounds that were, to us, background noise. And this is what, again, goes back to the sensory issues, right? We do the things that make our sensory modalities more feel regulated. And so, the fact that he's counting or rotely repeating these things is not the issue. It's that he's doing it loudly. You just need to shape the behavior of doing it in your head.
Yes. But I think that a lot of our kids don't understand when you verbally say, quiet. They don't understand what that is. We have to model that behavior.
And you can just sit quietly.
And for my son, one of the greatest things anybody ever gave us, they took a piece of pipe and it had an elbow and an elbow, and they would have him speak into it so that he could hear his own voice, because it just goes from one to the other. And then they would have him practice, okay, do it louder so he could hear what it was, and do it softer, and do it very quiet and whisper, but he could actually hear himself. It never occurred to me that he couldn't hear himself and he didn't know what those words meant.
Absolutely. And sometimes we actually even will record something and play it soft, play it loud so that the child understands. And I practice. We have another lesson which is all about soft, louder, 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 so that the child realizes they can control the volume as well.
Yes, amazing. And I'm starting to freak because we've only gotten through some questions, but we have more time. If you're just tuning in, we're staying live for 2 hours. And the second hour, we're going to podcast the first hour this week, but the second hour we'll podcast. They did ask for you to repeat the name of the tests. The tests, yes.
𝗔𝗕𝗢𝗜, and I believe it's 𝗔𝗕𝗢𝗚, Merrill Palmer, or lighter R, which is LEITERR, which stands for revised.
Don't forget, you can watch Ask Dr. Doreen live every Tuesday morning at 10 a.m. Pacific time. We hope to see you there.